I had 4 different neurologists. The first one told me, "There's nothing I can do for you," then tries to schedule me for a follow-up, and I'm like, "Why am I gonna come back if there's nothing you could do for me?" I didn't say that, but, just didn't make sense to me. So on to neuro number 2, he gave me a pill that, kinda took the edge off, took a little bit of the pain away. I'm like, "Okay, can you give me something to help me sleep?" Because I was going through these just brutal downward cycles where the pain would made it harder to sleep, which made the pain worse. And he said he didn't want to give me the regular stuff just because of my injury. And he said, "No, there's nothing I can give you." So on to neuro number 3. Right away, she tells me, "Let me give you amitriptyline," and it worked. And I'm beyond grateful to my doctors. I would not be where I am without them. The only reason I tell that story is how many people would have stopped with that first one.
Welcome to Beyond the Pain, the podcast that explores what it really takes to break free from chronic pain and reclaim your life. I'm your host, Lee Brandon, and someone who's spent over 2 decades helping people get to the root cause of pain that no one else could explain. Whether you're dealing with long-term back issues, joint pain, nerve discomfort, or mysterious symptoms that just won't go away, this show is here to help you go deeper. Because beyond the pain, there's clarity, strength, and power waiting for you. Each week, we'll uncover the physical, emotional, biochemical, and energetic causes of pain and how to transform them. Let's dive deep into this week's episode. In today's episode, we're exploring the fascinating intersection between pain, trauma, and the subconscious mind. My guest this week, Matt Johnson, shares a deeply personal journey from surviving a severe brain injury and facing the challenges that followed to discovering powerful approaches such as hypnosis and neuro-linguistic programming that transformed not only his recovery, but also his understanding of healing itself. We discussed how subconscious patterns can influence pain, the role that trauma may play in persistent symptoms, and how mind-body approaches can empower individuals to participate more actively in their own healing journey. If you've ever wondered whether addressing what's happening beneath conscious awareness could change your experience of pain, then this is an episode you won't want to miss. Matt, welcome to Beyond the Pain. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to this. So, Matt, before we get into the work that you're doing now, what I'd really love to do is to start with your story. So maybe if you could share, what's your journey and how did you end up doing what you do today?
Yeah, 2016, I got a severe brain injury. I was hiking tide pools with my kids and I slipped and landed the back of my head on a slab of solid rock. I hit so hard, my brain actually rebounded, hit the top of my skull, and I twisted the part above my eyes, damaged my optic nerve. I have no words to describe the pain that I was in. If you've ever been zapped by electricity and felt that intense pins and needles type feeling, that's what was going on in my head. For the next several years, I was so sensitive to light and sound, I couldn't even be in a room with the lights on. It was just too painful. And I had a room in my house I playfully nicknamed my dungeon. I had black hefty bags taped over the windows. It just, total blackout in there. In prison, they call this solitary confinement. And, definitely not an uplifting environment. But I did something on day 2 in there that, paved the way for me to get out. And that was I made a decision. Now, the word decision comes from the Latin root de, which means from, and cadere, which means to cut. When you make a true decision, you cut off any other possibility. I had no clue how I was going to do it, but I just knew I wouldn't stop until I could, get out of there and live my life again. I started out going the medical route. I had 4 different neurologists. The first one told me, "There's nothing I can do for you," then tries to schedule me for a follow-up. And I'm like, "Why am I going to come back if there's nothing you could do for me?" I didn't say that, but, just didn't make sense to me. So on to neuro number 2, he gave me a pill that kind of took the edge off, took a little bit of the pain away. And I'm like, okay, can you give me something to help me sleep? Because I was going through these just brutal downward cycles where the pain would made it harder to sleep, which made the pain worse. And he said he didn't want to give me the regular stuff just because of my injury. And he said, "No, there's nothing I can give you." So on to neuro number 3. Right away, she tells me, "Let me give you amitriptyline," and it worked. And I'm beyond grateful to my doctors. I would not be where I am without them. The only reason I tell that story is how many people would have stopped with that first one.
Mm.
You know what I mean? It's, when you've made that decision that of where you're going, then if somebody tells you no or doesn't have your answer, then, the next question is, who does have that answer? You know what I mean? Who's next? And so taking that approach, I just kept going. I read, over a year and a half, I read every medical study there was on, brain injuries and how to heal them. I tried everything from amino acids to hyperbaric oxygen, and I put together a 3-page document on all the harebrained treatments that helped me, most of the stuff my neuros never even knew about. But if anyone listening to this has a brain injury, definitely reach out to me. I can help you. I give that out. I give a presentation on it to the San Diego Brain Injury Foundation where I explain them all in depth. I give both of those out, no charge. But it was about that time I gave the presentation, I realized that medical science was not going to be able to heal me. And it was terrifying for me because I knew nothing else. So
Mm.
again, the question became, all right, medical science doesn't have my answer. Who does? And so I started looking for what else is out there. Now, lucky for me, I live in California, so I had a lot to choose from. So
Mhm.
I started getting into energy medicine, things like that. I'd been a complete skeptic my entire life. It was not even on my radar. But, when you're desperate, you'll try anything. And one of the first things I tried was called Reiki. And
Mhm.
I told you I had that pins and needles type feeling in my head. The best description I can give is she took those pins and needles and kind of made them fly in formation, if that makes sense. And it took the sting away. I'm like, whoa, I have no idea what you're doing, but please don't stop. So
Mm.
at the end of the session, I asked her, can you show me how to do that? And so spent a few days with her, learned Reiki. I went on to learn pranic healing, Qigong, Silva holistic faith healing, just anything I could find that, seemed to help. I try to just dive in and get good at it. And I started to turn the tide. I did a huge amount of healing over the next couple of years, but I just could not shake that light and sound sensitivity. It's just too painful to go out and live my life. So at this point, I'm thinking, do I have permanent damage? So I went and found a special type of brain scan. MRIs look at the tissue, which when you have a brain injury, unless you've got something really bad, it doesn't really tell you much.
Mm.
I found what's called a SPECT scan, done by Dr. Daniel Amen, who's famous in brain circles. SPECT will actually map the electrical activity in the brain, and he's written a ton of books where he shows Alzheimer's patient scans. It looks like they got a hole in their brain just for areas that are deactivated. So,
Mm.
long story short, I went and got my scan, and my brain was okay, but areas that were supposed to be dark were lit up like fireworks, and they diagnosed me with PTSD, which looking back, I'd had it for most of my life and never even realized it. I'd always known I'd had, issues with anxiety, depression, things like that, but I'd never really put that label to it. I thought, that's something soldiers get, right?
Mm.
But right away, I knew what the issue was. With a brain injury, the name of the game is bringing your brain waves down, giving your brain a chance to rest and repair itself. The PTSD was keeping me in fight or flight and sabotaging the healing process. So I knew if I wanted to beat the brain injury, I had to beat the PTSD first. Yet again, I had no clue how I was going to do this, but lucky for me, I was already familiar with the incredible power of hypnosis. I'd seen my dad, who, he'd smoked a pack a day for over 30 years and tried over and over again to quit pills, patches, gums, you name it. Failed every single time until he got hypnotized. After one session, he told me he never even craved cigarettes again. They wiped out one of the toughest addictions there is in an afternoon. You
Mm.
know what I mean? And also, I was familiar with neuro linguistic programming, or NLP, from a guy named Tony Robbins. Tony famously had a woman that had 152 different personalities, and he was actually able to integrate her right there on the spot in about 45
Wow.
minutes. I mean, that's the power of this stuff.
Mm.
So knowing, not much more than that, I just dove in and I wound up getting quadruple certified. I peppered every instructor I had with the exact same question: how do you heal PTSD? And they all tried to help me, but none of them really had the answer. And so back to the internet and looking for, all right, who does have my answer? And I spent the next 2.5 years just binging every course I could find on hypnosis, NLP. And over that 2.5 years, I put together a protocol that I was able to actually heal my PTSD. And about 6 months later, I healed the brain injury at long last. So, long-winded answer to your question, but yeah, that's how I
Mm.
got into what I'm doing.
Yeah, very interesting story. Um, and it's amazing how many people come on to this show who have been through their own journey. and then turn that into something positive,
Yeah,
what we call it, the hero's journey, right? You get your own challenge to face. You find your mentor or your mentors, they teach you how to overcome it. And then you come out the other side, and then you can help other people going through the same
absolutely.
issues. Yeah, it's great. It's great. It's great to hear that, you've come out the other side, you know. Um, Sometimes I do get people reach out to me to come on my show, and they're still going through that journey.
Hmm.
And I often say to them, come back when you've done the circle, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah.
obvious they haven't found all the answers yet,
Yeah.
you know. So yeah, it's great. It's great that you've come out the other side. And the other thing is, we'll go through several heroes' journeys as well, right? It's not only just one. And you've kind of alluded to, you had two yourself. You had PTSD, and
Hmm.
then you had a brain injury, right? But then obviously one impacted on the other as well, which prevented the healing. So I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding as to what hypnosis is. I think some
Hmm.
people, they see a guy on stage making people, dance like Michael Jackson or move around like a monkey or something.
Cluck like a
How would
chicken.
yeah,
That's the fear I usually get.
how would you explain hypnosis in simple terms for someone who perhaps doesn't have a deep understanding of hypnosis, and I guess more importantly, how it can help people?
Absolutely. Hypnosis is where we just kind of set aside your conscious mind and just let it relax for a little while so the subconscious mind can go out and play. Your subconscious controls everything in your body that you don't have to think about: your breathing, heartbeat, body temperature, how much insulin you crave after a meal, also that pit in your stomach that you get when you think about something that stresses you out, or the ache in your back or whatnot. It's all driven by your subconscious. Not to mention, by your 30th birthday, up to 95% of all your day-to-day behaviors. The example I like to use for that is, think back to the first time you ever drove a car. Your hands were 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. You were super focused on not hitting anything. You had to be, right? Fast
Couldn't even
forward a
have the
few years.
radio on, right?
Yeah. Fast forward a few years and you had coffee in one hand, cell phone in the other, right? I'm kidding. Please don't do that. But that shows the process, right? It's, most of us have had the experience
I've
of,
actually seen women doing their makeup whilst
yeah.
driving their car.
Yeah. I saw a guy reading the paper once going down the freeway. It's really, but, um,
Again, we're not condoning that to anybody.
no, no, please don't do that. Please, pay attention. But, most of us have had the experience of driving and realizing we hadn't even been paying attention, right?
Mm,
How did you not crash? It's because your subconscious mind learned how to drive just through
mm.
repetition, right? So that illustrates the process. Anything you do repeatedly like that, it's like brushing your teeth, is you can just do it on automatic pilot. We have no idea how much of our behaviors is driven by that, especially as adults. It's mind blowing, really. But your subconscious mind doesn't think. It works just like a computer. Whatever's programmed into there is is what it's going to act on. And
It's like an algorithm.
yeah, absolutely. And human beings, 0 to 7 roughly, are in what's called the imprinting phase, where your brain is taking in huge amounts of data, but we haven't developed what's called a critical faculty yet, which just means we can't judge anything that's coming in. So, this is when we create, false beliefs about ourselves. Kids have the unfortunate tendency to take responsibility for everything. Really common thing is, mom and dad are fighting. I must have done something wrong, right? When in
Mm,
reality, we had nothing to do with it. But that's when we create, the vast majority of the false beliefs about ourselves, and really, it's where the seeds of our identity are really formed before we have the ability to judge anything that's coming in. So, if you look back to what was going on for you, during those years, were mom and dad happy? Was it a peaceful time or something else? That's still affecting you today. Those programs that you picked up from the people and the environment around you form the basis of your personality.
mm,
Those are lodged in your subconscious. Now, I used the driving example before. That same process can happen for negative things too: limiting beliefs, negative emotions, bad habits. When things like that get lodged in there, you need the right tools to go in and rewrite those programs, just like reprogramming a computer. And NLP
mm.
and hypnosis are the ultimate toolkit. to be able to do that. It's just a series of, simple visualizations, to, go in and, you know, first of all, identify how you do those programs and then rewrite them. I have a quick example that I like to use if that's okay.
Mm.
If you think about something that stresses you out, hopefully nothing too scary, but maybe an overdue bill or conversation you're not looking forward to having, think about that and notice where that stress comes up in your body. Point to it. Now, in your mind's eye, if that feeling had a color, what color would it be? First impression.
Black.
Good. Is there more than one color?
It's a bit of white in there as well.
Okay, that feeling, that black and white color, if it had a shape, what shape would it be? Again, first impression.
A rough, round shape, but not perfectly round, but roundish.
Okay, that roundish black and white feeling, if it were moving, what direction would it be turning in? If it's hard to tell, try turning it one way, then the
Clockwise.
other, see what feels more
Clockwise.
natural. Okay, good. Try turning the opposite way and see what happens to the feeling.
Yeah, it softens.
Yeah. Now, find the direction that feels best for you, maybe most peaceful or most empowering. And if you'd like to, you can spin it up in that new direction, amp up that feeling by making it go faster and faster while you drain all that color right out of there. Just make it totally transparent in there and then fill it back up with whatever color you like. Some people like gold or pink, green or blue, whatever
Yeah,
feels most
yellow.
peaceful for you.
Yellow came up
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah, everybody's different. Just take whatever, your subconscious gives you and just run with it. Now, still spinning your favorite color in your favorite direction, try adding sparkle to it once it starts to swirl throughout like a candy cane or one of those poles in front of a barber shop. Notice what does that do to the feeling?
Feels good.
Yeah. What we've just done is taken a subconscious process called stress, right? And we've identified it. We gave it a color, a shape, a spin, right? And once we do that, we assigned, visual components to it. Now we can start to play with it. We can tell the subconscious mind, no, let's do it this way. And that will actually change the feelings in your body. Really simple stuff, but really powerful when you dive down into it.
Mm,
That is the basis of what I do. That's, hypnosis and NLP.
mm.
A lot of people have the fear of, they, like you mentioned, they see the stage hypnotist up at the fair or whatever, and he's having people cluck like a chicken or whatnot. With hypnosis, you never lose the ability to accept or reject any suggestion given. That ability is there with you no matter how deep you go. You're always in line with your values. You have your wits about you the entire time. If you've ever been to a movie and had that movie affect you emotionally, maybe get inspired or empowered, or, some people even cry at movies. What was it that made you cry? Was it the popcorn or, the theater being cold? No, you got absorbed in the experience and you had a continually narrowing focus, right? You got basically absorbed in that story. That combined with an alpha brainwave state is the definition of a hypnotic trance. That movie hypnotized you. We get the same thing when you've been driving for a long time and you get really zoned out. That's called road hypnosis. You're actually going in and out of hypnotic states all the time, every day, but we just don't realize them. Most of them are really
Mm,
shallow. It's the
mm.
exact same mechanism, though.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the I guess that the thing that really opened my eyes to all of this was Bruce Lipton's book, The Biology of Belief.
I reference that book all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, he describes it so well. I know he suggests that 95 to 99% of all our choices and behaviors are subconscious. And it describes really well how that first 7 years of life we're in the delta and theta brainwave states, and
Yes.
how our environment just basically gets downloaded like the old CD-ROMs that we used to have, showing our ages, knowing what they are.
Yeah.
Um,
I go way further back than that. But yeah.
oh, me too, me too. Um, but yeah, it just really opened my eyes up to that kind of world, I guess, and how it's helped me a lot. That book alone has helped me a lot working with people over the years, understanding, you know, when when working with someone, quite often I'll get them to do food diaries, and
Mhm.
They come in and, they're looking a bit sheepish, and I kind of know what's coming, and they show me their diet sheets and they've been eating really badly.
Mhm.
And even though I always say to them, look, this isn't like a school situation. I'm not marking your homework. I'm not your teacher. I'm not your doctor. I'm not above you. I'm not below you. We're just equals, and I'm just consulting and helping you.
Mhm.
And I'll have given them some things to do, and then they'll come in and say, "Oh, no, I didn't do them." And you say, "Okay, so why did you choose the choices that you made?"
Mhm.
And they say, "I don't know."
C
Right? It's
Their
because,
conscious mind did
it,
not make that decision.
yeah,
That's why they don't know.
yeah, and I ask them that question. I say, "If you're not conscious of the answer, which part of your brain made those decisions?" And they're like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Was it your conscious brain?" And they're like, "Well, no, because I don't know why I made those choices." So, okay, so do you think it might be your subconscious mind? And they're like, "Ah." And then it opens up the conversation to kind of dive a bit deeper into that. Um, yeah, and NLP is something that, I haven't studied officially, but um, over 20 years ago, I did work with a guy. He was a consultant. So I worked for a health club chain for about 5 years,
Mhm.
and he would come in and work with. Like, we were there were four of us who were trainers, and we used to train the staff. And he taught us probably a quite a basic generic overview of NLP,
Mhm.
but not, obviously not to the degree of studying it properly. Um, but even the basic level I studied it at was very, very useful, particularly when it come to helping people change their behaviors. Because again,
Mhm.
I luckily recognized very early on in my career, back in the sort of late 90s, I guess it would have been, that I can give someone the best advice in the world, but if they don't follow that advice, the advice is useless.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest challenge most people in the health arena have is not necessarily the advice they're giving, but it's actually the person following the advice.
Mhm.
Right? Do they follow the program? Because no program's going to work if someone doesn't do it.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, absolutely.
if you've been living with pain for a while, you've probably felt frustrated, like you're trying lots of things, but nothing really changes. That's because pain rarely comes from one single issue. It's usually biomechanics, nutrition, stress, sleep, lifestyle habits, and your nervous system is all interacting together. When we look at everything as a whole, the pattern becomes clear. If you want help understanding what's driving your pain, you can book a discovery call with me at bodycheck.co.uk. That's bodycheck.co.uk/consultation. All right, back to the episode. Talking about the subconscious, and obviously, again, going by Bruce Lipton's work, you know, 95 to 99% of choices and decisions, behaviors are subconscious. So it's obviously the subconscious mind is, again, according to Lipton, a million times more powerful than the conscious mind. I guess it raises questions about pain, which obviously is what this show's all about. But here's a question I'll be quite interested to get your view on. What what do you think pain is?
Good question. Pain is a response from the nervous system. It's a signal that something's wrong. I actually have a pain control hypnosis. If you'd like to give it out to your viewers, I can give you a link
Yeah, great.
to Google Drive. Yeah, it's very similar to the unspinning technique that we did, but
Mm,
it's an actual hypnosis, very powerful. But um, pain is it's when you have pain, it's a signal from your body. So do not ignore it. You know what I mean? Don't just hypnotize it away because,
mm,
that can lead to trouble. But, when it's chronic pain or things like that, again, your subconscious is in control of that. And when you use the right tool, in this case, hypnosis, you can actually go in and numb that pain. There's a cool NLP exercise also called, glove anesthesia and all that, where, you imagine sticking your hand in ice and you can actually, take that, cold hand, you'll physically feel it be colder and put it on the area that's hurting, and it will take the pain away, temporarily.
Mm.
But, I mean, the power of the mind is incredible. Like you're talking about Bruce Lipton, he talked about how, beliefs can reprogram our DNA, literally control what
Mm.
genes are on or off. Way back in the day, Dr. Bernie Siegel from Yale did really
Mm.
fascinating research with multiple personality disorder, where he saw his patient's eye color change.
Mm.
Scars, physical markings, would disappear and reappear depending on what, personality was coming through, health conditions, heart, high blood pressure, diabetes, things like that would come and go. That's the power of the subconscious mind. So,
Mm.
that power can be negative and work against you, or you can harness it to, get the subconscious on your side. We've all heard of, the world famous placebo effect, which, has been shown to have up to 70% cure rate in clinical drug trials. Here in the States, drug companies are required to test their stuff against the placebo just because
Mm.
it is that powerful. A lot of times it's, it works better than the pill that they're testing. But why is that? It's because, again, everything in your body that you don't control, your subconscious mind does. And when you learn to tap into that and rewrite those programs that are running things, that's when you can make changes that, seem like miracles. And in reality, they're not. It's like my dad when he quit smoking. That just the hypnosis addressed those programs where they lived, which was in his subconscious mind. You do that by reprogramming, not by telling or giving information. That's all conscious, right?
Mm.
So, you mentioned the example of, changing the diet. I'll I'll use the example of working out because, this is a really common one for people, a lot of pain associated with this. Every New Year's, here in the States, I see my gym packed, the first week of January. By the second week, about half the new people are gone, and by week 3, it's usually back to normal, right? Why do so many people give up 2 weeks and do a 52-week year? It's because, most of us, and I've done this before, I've been guilty of it, we take the approach of, I'm going to starve myself and work out 6 hours a day. Now, taking on that much pain at once, how long do you think you're going to last? Myself, I probably quit by day 2, but I've done the opposite though. I call it, Tony calls this 2 millimeter shifts. You just take where you are, and if you're intimidated by going to the gym, maybe just go swipe your card the first day, and day 2, maybe you try a machine, but just take these tiny little baby steps every single day. If you improve 1% per day, that is not 365% per year. That's actually 3,700%. That's 37 times improvement because that 1% will snowball, right? It compounds on itself. And, uh, you know, if you've had the experience of, you going to the gym and you leave with just a little bit left in the tank, before long, I'm talking within a week, you'll be raring to go back just because you associate it with having more energy instead of, beating yourself up, breaking yourself
Mm.
down, which makes you quit. But those 2 millimeter shifts, Tony actually interviewed a guy named Stu Middleman who used that same approach to run 1,000 miles on his 50th birthday. Yeah, that's like what, 40 something marathons back to back, right? At 50 years old, just by doing
Mm.
those 2 millimeter shifts. Another one I use is fun gets done. Me personally, I had a time in my life where I had to get up at 4 a.m. I had 2 small kids. I had a full-time job and a side hustle. And the only time I could work out was to get up at 4. Now that is not easy to do, but
Mm.
knowing the 2 millimeter approach and the fun gets done. No, you know, I was, I'm a big Tony fan. I was listening to him all the time, at the time. So I would listen to him during my workout. And then I'm a big basketball player. I would always end my workouts shooting 10 minutes of hoops. So when that alarm went off at 4 a.m., I never once wanted to get up. Right? But I had a picture that I could flash on that, all right, I'm going to be, feeding my mind. I'm going to have, fun doing this. I get to shoot hoops at the end. That got me out of bed. Using those 2 approaches over a 6-year period, I can count on one hand the number of workouts that I missed. It's all about that mental movie that you play in your head. Um, one of the most common things that I get is, people procrastinating or whatever. It's the same thing. It's what is the mental movie you're playing? Here on the States, April 15th, is the deadline for us to file our taxes with the Internal Revenue Service. Uh, the vast majority of people wait up until April 15th before they file their taxes. And what happens on that day? All of a sudden, that mental movie changes. You go from the pain in the moment of, I don't feel like doing this, to, all right, what's going to happen if I don't get this done today? Right? It's just that simple mental shift changes your motivation. Do
Mm,
that in advance for yourself for whatever it is you're trying to do. If it's food, take the 2 millimeter approach. Take the worst thing that you eat and replace it with something healthy. Or, if you're really, hungry or whatnot, eat the food that you're craving, but, eat something healthy first. Try to fill your stomach up with healthy stuff before you eat the naughty food, right? And that makes a huge difference, just those, simple shifts.
mm.
Another
Yeah.
long-winded answer, but
Yeah. I mean, I look at pain as a communication pathway from the subconscious to the conscious mind.
yes. Yes.
And it's, again, apologies, I'm going to bore my regular listeners, but, I think a good example is a fire alarm in your house,
Mhm,
right? If you're asleep at night, you're unconscious. So if there was a fire, say in your basement, and you're on the second floor and, asleep, you're not conscious that there's fire. So the alarm system goes off to make you consciously aware that there's
mhm,
danger, right? So, some people call pain danger receptors,
mhm.
right? They're making your body aware of danger. Um, and I think one of the things that I see is people have a real challenge switching off the alarm even after the fire's gone out.
Yeah.
Um, but it's funny you use that analogy of the gym because I went to my local gym on Monday. I've never ever seen so many people in there.
Yeah.
And there's one guy, I don't see him very often, but I happen to see it. He's the only guy I ever get into a conversation with at the gym. Because when I go to the gym, I go to work out. I don't go to socialize.
Yeah. Yeah.
I work out, I go back home and I start work. And I was talking to him and I just said, there's so many people here today. That's unusual. And he said, it's January. And then I hadn't even thought, right? It's just, I just don't, because I generally go at times when there's just not a lot of people there.
Same.
And I went yesterday, which was the Tuesday. There was hardly anyone there. I mean, it could be everyone's doing Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That could be
Mhm.
everyone's plan, or it could be they went on Monday and that might be it for them for the year. So I just thought
Yeah.
that was quite funny. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I didn't go today, but I'll go tomorrow, which will be Thursday and Friday. It'll be interesting to see how many people are in there. Certainly on Friday, because it might be, as I said, they might be doing Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Um, so in terms of hypnosis and NLP, so for me, there's a difference between reducing pain
Mhm.
and resolving pain. But I guess they could do both. Would I be right assuming that?
They can do both. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And again, it depends on what's going on. You know what I mean? If you've just broken a bone or something like that, then, that's kind of tough to do.
Yeah.
But, hypnosis actually can pull that off though. There, there are many women who have given, childbirth, just hypnotized, no anesthetic and
Mm.
felt no pain.
I
You
know
know what I mean?
vasectomies are quite common as well now. Vasectomies are done with hypnosis
Mhm.
and dental work as well.
Yeah. It is absolutely incredible, the amount of control the subconscious has over the body. It's just I'm still fascinated by it.
So, obviously treating. So I look at pain or even any kind of symptom as you can treat it. So one example of treating pain might be taking a painkiller, right?
Mhm.
And it would reduce the pain signal. But to cure it would be to find the root cause of the problem and deal with it
Right.
at the root
Yes.
cause level.
Yes.
So how does hypnosis and NLP work in both those circumstances?
just like I had you think about something that stressed you out before we went in and, unspun that stress, if it's a mental process that's causing it, then you wanna fix it, at that level, right? You wanna fix the thought patterns that are causing
Mm,
it. If you've got something physically wrong with your body, then yes, absolutely, talk to your doctor, get, uh, physical therapist or whatnot, resolve the physical issue. One thing I will mention, Western medicine is the best in the world. If you got a broken bone or something acute like that, it's the best there is at fixing
mhm,
that. Chronic health conditions, though, I my experience has been Eastern medicine is really, really good for this, and
mhm.
your body runs on electricity. It's, when the electricity stops flowing through you is when you take a dirt nap, right?
Yeah.
Eastern medicine, it's all about the energy pathways, those electrical circuits running through your body is called meridians. But, Qigong is an excellent practice, and you can find this for free on YouTube.
Mm,
Do Qigong exercises. It's just like the fountain of youth because it's
mm,
all about, unlocking that energy and getting it flowing again, which, a lot of times, if you've got issues, it's energy it gets stuck somewhere. And, we don't, we don't think in those terms in the West, but, that doesn't mean it's not real. And,
mhm,
I told you my story. I, was a complete skeptic and all I knew was Western medicine until I had no choice.
mm,
And that's what opened me up to it. But, if you've got like a chronic type condition, then I highly recommend, Tai Chi, Qigong, something like that. You can find it for free on YouTube. There's wonderful stuff up there, but
mm,
just, again, try it and see what works for you and go
mm,
from there. If feel better after that, then do more of that. You know what I mean? Make it a daily practice, but it
mm.
it will literally change your life.
Yeah, quite a few years ago, 'cause it's over 20 years ago, I used to do a Korean form of Qigong. So I used to
Mm.
go to this center, and there'd probably be about 20 people on average in the class. And we used to speak Korean.
Oh,
I don't know
wow.
I don't know too many words. It was a long time ago now. Although I had a Korean guest on recently, and he was quite surprised when I
Yeah.
when I said thank you in Korean. Um, but I used to go because I used to live in North London, and the class was in South London. It's a long way. It's a long journey. It's like a couple of hours to get home,
Oh, wow.
and I used to have to walk from the studio to the train station, and it was probably half a mile, I'm guessing.
Mhm.
And I'd be walking along, and I'd be thinking to myself, I can't feel my feet hit the ground. It feels like
Mm.
I'm walking on a cloud. I was just so like effervescent, just buzzing with energy. It was a very, very nice but strange feeling that I literally, it, it wasn't like I was walking on concrete. It was like I was literally walking on soft pillows. You know, I used to love
Mhm.
going, but in the end, I had to stop because it was just too far. Um, I was going to de-stress, and the journey was stressing me out after I came out. But but yeah, anything like yeah, I agree though. Tai Chi, Qigong. Even if you take out the balancing of the energy meridians, that's just the fact that you're moving and you're moving gently, and you're pumping the body, you're pumping blood around the body, you're pumping the muscles, you're pumping lymph around the body, you're stimulating synovial fluid from the synovium in your joints. So I know a lot of
Movement is
people.
lubricant.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are a little bit concerned or frightened of exercise, and maybe that's the wrong word. Maybe movement is a better word,
Mhm.
um, because we know that movement in itself is really good for pain. And the other
Mhm.
thing I suggest people do is get in a swimming pool, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Whether it's walking, jogging, swimming, again, whatever works for the individual, but just get moving, but in a pain-free way, you know.
Right. Right. I tell people do what's fun for you.
Mm,
So whatever it is you like to do, whatever you're gonna look forward to doing, that's what you're actually gonna follow through on.
Yeah.
And so, if that's walking in the park or swimming is wonderful, but
Mm.
you wanna be moving your entire body every day, pumping fresh oxygen through you. That will keep you healthy and youthful, for a long time.
Yeah. It was Jack Canfield, I think, that said, if it ain't fun, don't do it,
Yes.
or
Yeah.
something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing. But a common myth I still hear, even from professionals, is that diet has nothing to do with chronic pain. And that's simply not true. Your gut and your immune system influence inflammation, hormones, energy, and yes, pain. If you're eating foods that drive inflammation, it's almost impossible to feel better long term. The pain free plate gives you 7 foods that help settle your system and support lasting relief. You can download it at bodycheck.co.uk. That's bodycheck.co.uk/pain free plate. Now, let's get back to the conversation. Do you know, or can you explain what's happening neurologically or emotionally when pain shifts through this kind of work?
That is a great question. I do not have a good answer for that.
Okay.
I know that, pain is, just an activation of the nerves, and I know your subconscious mind can control that. I would
Mm,
guess that it's shutting them off in some
mm,
way. I don't know how that works though.
mm. Yeah, I guess, um, again, looking at pain, well, look, you can look at acute pain, you can look at chronic pain. Acute
Mhm.
pain, you need it. It's trying to, if you've just broken your leg, right? You want to
Yes.
know, you don't want to be walking on it because you'll
You wanna
just
get that
create,
fixed, yes.
right?
Definitely.
But
Chronic pain too, if you definitely wanna look at the cause.
yeah, but if you broke a leg 12 years ago and it's still painful,
Mhm.
there's a good chance that those pain signals probably shouldn't be going off, right?
Right,
Um,
right.
but I would imagine, and this comes back to your story at the beginning, if you have PTSD, it's going to be stimulating the sympathetic nervous system, the stress response
Mhm.
in the body.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
what does stress do? It makes you feel like you're in danger. What is
Mhm.
pain? It's a danger signal, right?
Yeah.
It's gonna affect the way that you breathe. There's so many things that when you're in a stress state is not ideal if you're in some sort of chronic pain situation.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, tissues don't heal very well either. But if we are
Yes.
talking, a real chronic condition where tissues have healed, the last thing you want is to be in a stress state. And it might be, and again, it might be that consciously you're not aware of the stress, but it might be subconscious. And again, that can come back to that first 7 years of life. And again, most people, if you say, how much do you remember of your first 7 years of life? Most people don't remember much at all. And that's
Yeah.
quite normal because of the brainwave states that you're in when your environment is getting downloaded. And, you know, if, as an example, if as a child, you didn't feel that you got the love and attention you needed unless you were sick, unless you were in
Yes.
pain,
Yeah.
right? And then what happens? Oh, if your mother's at work, she probably needs to take the day off and she needs to look after you. Now you've got one-on-one time with your mother. So
Yeah.
that gets imprinted in your subconscious. And then when you become an adult, you've got all these health issues going on, you're in pain, and your conscious mind is saying, "Oh, I can't cope with this pain. This is terrible. I just want to get rid of this pain." But your subconscious mind is saying, "Yeah, but if you don't have this pain, no one's going to give you any attention. No one's going to love you." So then people start sabotaging and then they don't understand why they're doing it.
Yeah.
So I would guess hypnosis and NLP would be amazing for those kind of situations.
It can be. What you're referring to is called secondary gain, where,
Mm,
like you say, if you've got this chronic condition or whatnot, and you're getting attention from it or getting some kind of a need met,
mm,
you're getting, you're important because you've got the biggest problem, something like that. unless you truly want to resolve it, unless you're truly ready, then nothing's going to work for you. Nothing I know of, right? You've got to be ready to let go of it. Once you are, yeah, it can absolutely be done. But yeah, that is a really, really great point. It's, you know, a lot of times we've developed these mechanisms to get our needs met, you know what I mean, whether that's for attention or whatnot, and that can physically manifest into things. I've heard stories of people who, Monday morning is, I think it's like 40% of all heart attacks happen on Monday morning. It's
Mm,
one day out of seven, right?
mm,
One part of one day out of seven. It's like, there's a reason for that. You know what I mean? You can, there's a really awful trick people can play, and please do not do this. But, if you have several people go up to someone and say, "Oh, you really don't look too well. How, you feeling okay?" That person will physically start to feel it after, he gets enough of those suggestions. So,
mm,
and please don't do it. Do the opposite. Make
mm,
people feel better.
mm.
But, again, that's the power that your mind has over the body. It's absolutely incredible. So that's why I'm an evangelist for, getting your mainly your subconscious mind on your side and having it do what it is you want to do. You know what I mean? Live the life
Mm.
that you want to live. You can't do that when you're in chronic pain.
Yeah. So obviously, again, going back to the first 7 years of life, our subconscious, well, we've only got a subconscious really in those first seven
Mhm,
years of life. If you look at it that way. And, it can be situations like I've just described, or it can be traumatic experiences as a child, which then kind of makes you feel unsafe as an adult.
mhm,
And again, feeling unsafe again is going to stimulate sympathetic nervous system. But obviously the person isn't aware of the trauma when they're
mhm,
a child. But I guess again, particularly hypnosis is something that could potentially bring that up, make the person aware of it. And then my understanding is you can come across a situation like that, but then you can use things like I can't remember the actual phrase, but like positive words to kind of um, rewrite the subconscious program. Is that correct?
mhm. You talking about like affirmations?
Yes.
Yeah, you can do that. My personal opinion on affirmations, they do work, but it's kind of like filling a swimming pool with a teaspoon. You're gonna be there a while, you know what I mean? Now,
Mm,
I know people who have done this for days. They'll have the same affirmations play on repeat and just do it. That will absolutely work. Uh, Over on your side of the pond, there's a brilliant hypnotist named Marissa Peer. She's famous, but she broke a bone in her arm, and when they said it, they didn't set it right. The bones in her forearm were jagged when they took the cast off. And so she looked around, found a specialist for that kind of thing. And he said, you have two options: either have surgery or re-break the bone, which can cause other complications, or we have this therapy where we go in and manually, re-break the capillaries and move the bone back to where it's supposed to be. He says it's way too painful. Nobody ever finishes it. So either have surgery or live with a jagged forearm. She told him go ahead and book every session. I think it was like 3 weeks or 3 months or something like that. But he tried to talk her out of it. But she goes in, and right away she found out he was right. It was extremely painful. But she had, her headphones on and starts playing, songs like "Let's Get It Started," from the Black Eyed Peas, just keeping those right words in her brain. And what happens, your brain will ask you, do you really want to do this? And just keep that message playing on repeat. And it's okay, let's do it. And it'll serve up whatever energy you need to get it done. I mean, people have done miraculous things with that approach. But
mm,
she, the doctor was blown away. She was, the first one to finish that therapy. And he, asked her how she did it. She said, you saw me, this is, what I did. And, pretty soon his other patients had the Black Eyed Peas playing in their ears. And the success rate of his bone straightening therapy went from 0 to over 80% overnight, just with that simple trick, just keeping the
mm,
right words in your brain. So it is incredibly powerful, if you
mm.
do it, the right way.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I mean, what I was alluding to was actually more than affirmations. I can't remember the term it's kind of like positive suggestion or something along those
Mm,
lines. So taking an experience and turning it, flipping it under
mhm,
hypnosis and
yeah.
kind of rewriting the program. It wasn't
Reframing it?
necessarily. Yeah, it could be reframing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, hu Every human being has absolute control over 2 things: what we focus on and the meaning that we give to it. The ultimate example of this is a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. This guy
Mm,
was in Auschwitz and saw his family die. It's, not a worse environment than that I can think of anyway. And he was a Jewish psychiatrist, and he found a really interesting pattern: is the people who got in there and kept their focus on I'm going to get out of here, and found what he called a compelling future. And that could be just so I can tell the story so this never happens again, right? When they kept their focus there, those are the people who made it out. The people who got in there and said, "Oh, I'm done for," they didn't last long, right? It's my opinion, my experience, it's all about that mental movie that you're playing. It's, is it woe is me, or is it all right, here's the future that I'm going to. It goes back to that decision that I talked about in the beginning. Here's where I'm going to. I have to keep my mind focused on that. I knew sitting in that dungeon that I had to keep positive thoughts in my brain. I had to keep my mind, focused like a laser on where I was going. Otherwise, I was in a lot of trouble. And so, again, it's practicing those mental movies just like athletes rehearse. And here, I don't know how big basketball is over there. You're throwing a 9-inch ball through an 18-inch hoop from 30, 40, 50 feet away sometimes, and there are players over here who can do that at ridiculous levels. Just and the way they do it is they always visualize it going through the hoop, and that communicates to the subconscious mind, all right, this is where it's going. And that, I've done that myself. It's when you visualize yourself being your favorite player doing or something like that, or visualize going through, your success rate will skyrocket. It's
mm,
all about that communication with the subconscious mind. It controls where you want to go, but you're the one with the steering wheel.
mm. Yeah, a question I was going to ask you, and I think we might have already answered it, but are there particular types of pain that respond particularly well to hypnosis and NLP? Is it simply acute versus chronic, or is it more complicated than that?
I Not that I know of. I've done both. I To my knowledge, it'll work well for either one. I don't
Mm,
really know. Not sure of any studies or anything like that where it's done better. It's all about just, again, that focus. And just with hypnosis, the whole key is, all right, if you think back to your favorite game of pretend, like a kid, when you were a kid, right? For me, it was, me and my buddies would, go out and hunt each other using sticks for guns. You know what I mean? After a little while, at some level, that gun became real in our mind. You know what I mean? If there was part of us hanging back to say, no, it's just a stick, then we lost some of the impact, right? To the degree you can do that, just be a kid and dive in. That's the degree that you'll see the change. So, from what I've seen, working with people, as long as you do that, it works for both, chronic or
mm,
acute.
mm. I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess for acute and chronic pain conditions, hypnosis will help to lower the pain and potentially eliminate pain. But if it's, I guess there are times when, as we mentioned, you don't necessarily want to completely get rid of pain because it's there for a purpose.
Right. Right.
But when it comes to chronic conditions, I guess the question in my head is, can it get to the root cause of the chronic pain and then deal with it at that subconscious level?
That is a great question. That I can't give you a definitive answer on that. I think so. That kind of goes
I would have
back to
thought
Bernie
so.
Siegel and the patient's eye color changing, going from brown to blue and back. Health conditions would disappear and reappear. That, I think, is the potential for everybody.
Mm,
Whether or not a particular person can get there, or if I can lead someone there, I don't know. I think it really depends on the person and their motivation and just their you know where they're at. But
Mm,
I do know the vast majority of people have huge improvements from it. I can tell you
mm,
that.
mm,
But I don't know about there are stories about it. You know what I
mm,
mean? There, but again, those are the outliers. So, can everyone do it? I can't make that claim. I don't
mm,
really don't know, but I
yeah,
think so. But
mm,
I think it just depends on the
yeah,
person and where they're at.
yeah, yeah. So, kind of moving the conversation on, 'cause
Mhm.
I guess I was kind of leading to this next part in terms of trauma. So, can unresolved trauma or PTSD, in your experience, show up as physical pain?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I had that. That's actually really common. And if you think about it, we've seen study after study that links stress to it actually changes your biochemistry. You get adrenaline, cortisol, flooding your system, things like that. We can see physical changes in the body, and people who are chronically stressed tend to have chronic pain. There's a very high
Mm,
correlation between the two. There's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score, where he
mm.
talks about how trauma gets stored within the body
Is that Van der
physically.
Kolk?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
There's another good one called Answer Cancer. I
Mm,
forget the author's name, but he talks about how cancer and autoimmune system diseases, things like that, they tend to cluster in people, and they tend to cluster in people who've had what he calls a sensitizing event. It was basically trauma.
mm,
But that again, it's just like when we unspun that stress, the subconscious mind is gonna store that somewhere. It's going in and getting rid of that is it's all about going in and rewriting those programs.
yeah. Yeah. And again, just from another angle, if you're again in a kind of sympathetic, stressed state, what does that do to
Mhm.
your muscular system? It gets tight,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
What does that do to blood flow? It stops blood flow. Then you're more likely to get things like, you might get cramps. You might get, um, buildup of waste tissue, which feels uncomfortable, like a cramp. Trigger points in muscles, right? And you might be carrying that around for the rest of your life if you don't, you know, get to the root cause of that, whatever that was.
right.
Um, in your view, how does the subconscious store emotional experiences in the body? Do you have any thoughts on that? People often ask me what makes my approach different. The truth is, I don't look at pain through a single lens. I look at your movement, nutrition, gut health, stress load, sleep patterns, emotional stress, and nervous system because pain is rarely caused by just one thing. Once we look at everything together, the path forward becomes clear. If you'd like help understanding your unique pain pattern, book a discovery call at bodycheck.co.uk/consultation. That's bodycheck.co.uk/consultation. Now, back to the show.
That is a really fascinating topic. I'm not an expert on it. There is a lot of, if you look into like Eastern medicine,
Mm,
they have a lot of prescriptions for, anger stored in the liver, things like that.
mm,
I'm not a big expert on that. I
mm,
do believe it, just based on what I've seen. But yeah, a lot of times, people who feel unsupported have pain in their back,
mm,
and things like that. I have seen there is some correlation to that.
mm,
I'm not an expert on, what that is, but yeah, absolutely. It's there. There's a book called Louise Hay, or from Louise Hay. It's called Heal Your Body or something. It's a tiny little book, but it's like a
mm.
little
I think I
desk
know which one
reference
you mean.
on what the malady is actually signaling.
Mm,
I think there is some correlation there because I've looked at that book several times when dealing with people. It's like, oh yeah, she was right. And
mm,
it's really fascinating. Unfortunately, I'm not an expert on it.
mm.
But
Yeah, I actually interviewed an Australian lady called Inna Siegel, and she wrote a book called The Secret Language of Your Body. And it's very
mm,
similar to the Louise Hay book that you're um, mentioning. Um, yeah, I mean, from my own studies, um, again, it comes back to kind of traditional Chinese medicine. Um,
mhm,
this is something I learned again over 20 years ago. But um, when you have an event that creates an emotion, your body will tend to send it to your diaphragm for
mm,
starters. And then quite often, a healthy way to release the emotion is to vocalize it so it comes back out. So you might
yeah,
shout, scream, whatever. Or another way is to digest it through the digestive tract. And for some people, when their when their tummy rumbles or gurgles, that's actually the emotion being released from the body.
mhm,
In some situations, the diaphragm will hold on to the emotion, and then you can end up with things like breathing issues. You might have a
yes,
tight rib cage, things like that. Or
yeah,
it might send it from the diaphragm to anywhere in the body, and it can be stored anywhere. So it isn't from my experience, it isn't always, oh, if it's the liver, it's anger, if it's the lungs, it's grief, etc. Um, and I've studied a number of different um, modalities of energy medicine, and they kind of agree in that anything can cause anything, and also an emotion
mhm,
can go anywhere in the body as well. Um, but yeah, it's quite interesting.
yeah, and a lot of that happens under the radar. By
Mm,
definition, it's subconscious, right?
yeah, yeah.
And so we don't realize a lot of times when we're holding on to that stuff. You know what I mean? A big part of what I do is getting people in touch with their subconscious mind. When we unspun the stress before, people tend to go slower in the beginning because they're just getting in tune with, the processes that are going on, subconsciously and in their body. It's, once you're in tune with it, then it happens a lot faster usually. But it's, Milton Erickson, one of the, pioneers of hypnosis, brilliant guy. He used to tell his students, your patients are your patients, talking to hypnotists in training, because they're out of rapport with their subconscious mind. And
Mm,
there's a lot of truth in that. It's really, tuning into, all right, what is it I'm feeling? What's really going on for me? And until you do that, it's really hard to fix it.
mm. Yeah. So if someone's watching or listening this and they're kind of recognizing themselves in terms of what we've been discussing, how would you suggest to them hypnosis or NLP might be appropriate for them?
There's two parts of it in my view. There's the mental and the physical. If you need to deal with the physical part, and that's, flushing those stress chemicals out, that's doing the qigong, getting the body, the energy flowing and all that, getting the body regulated. But if you only do that, yoga is another good thing for that. But if you only do that, but you hold on to those mental patterns that are causing it, it's just going to come right back, in my opinion.
Mm,
So you really got to do both, the mental and the physical. Flush those stress chemicals out, exercise, get your body healthy and all that, but also deal with the mental side of it. If you're up for it, I have a really cool NLP exercise that will help get the subconscious mind on your side to help kind of activate that placebo effect, if you'd like. So if you think about, if you're not driving, close your eyes. It'll help the experience. But think about, we all want to recover, but when you think about that health condition, what is it you actually imagine in your mind when you think about the illness or condition? What pictures do you see? What words do you use? What feelings do you feel? Kind of tune into that for a second. If it's you laying in bed, then, we definitely need to change that. But um, now think about something that absolutely you'll recover from automatically, like a cut or a scrape, maybe a mild cold. Now, for 80-90% of people, it's going to be pictures that we get, but so I'll use that. But if you use a sound or a feeling, just kind of follow along. Think about, where did you flash that picture in your mind? Of recovering from that cut or that scrape or whatever. To the right or to the left? Is it a picture or a movie? How big is it? How far away? Is it in color or black and white? Flat or 3D? Clear or fuzzy? Are you in the picture seeing everything through your own eyes, or are you outside the picture like you're watching on a movie screen? Let's take a mental snapshot of this. This is how you do healing subconsciously, right? You're going to remember this, especially the location, but the size, the shape, the color, all of it. All right. Now, when you think about recovering or what's going to happen to you when you recover, we're going to fix this in just a second, but first we need to really tune into how you do it, right? Notice how you think differently about this health condition. Again, is that picture to the right or to the left? How big is it? How far away? Color, black and white, flat or 3D, clear or fuzzy. Notice the difference between that and how you do automatic healing, that cut or that mild cold, right? Notice the difference between the two. Now, I want you to take that picture of, the health condition that you have, and I want you to drain all the color right out of it. Just make it totally dull, lifeless, and as boring as you can possibly make it. And once you've done that, shrink it down to the size of a postage stamp. Now, in your mind's eye, I want you to bring up the movie of what you want instead. You completely healed. For me, when I was sitting in that dark dungeon, I used to imagine myself, dancing at my kids' weddings, right? Which was an impossible dream at the time, but I held on to it. I want you to do the same thing here. Think of yourself completely healed, healthy, vital. Whatever that scene looks like for you, the first thing that pops up is usually the right answer, right? What you want instead. Take that image and blow it up so it's as big as the screen at a drive-in movie theater. And like you're turning the knob on an old TV, make that picture brighten up even more, turn up the color, add sparkle to it if you want. What do you see? Really tune into it. What do you hear? Tune into those sounds. What do you feel? Where do you feel that in your body? You can spin that up if you'd like. Get into the experience as much as you can. And once you've done that, I want you to find that old, colorless, lifeless, shrunken movie that you left behind. And we're going to take it and attach it to the big one that you just created. Just clicking together like a Lego. Notice how every time that old movie pops up for you, you immediately shift your focus to the new one. It's so much bigger and brighter, more colorful, more interesting. Try to focus on that old movie and notice how your attention immediately jumps to the new one. So much richer in detail and sounds and feelings. Just pretend like you can't help it. You immediately jump every time you try to focus on that old movie. Now, I want you to take this new movie, what you want, the new healthy, vital you, and I want you to move it over to your healing station, where you went when you thought about that cut or that cold that you knew you were going to recover from. Take it, move it over, make it as much like your healing movie as you can, and snap it into place. Now, this is not a substitute for medical care, but what we've just done is signal to your subconscious, when we think about this issue, we want it to heal, right? Again, if you got something physical wrong with you, go see your doctor. This is not a substitute for any kind of care. We're just kind of stacking the deck in your favor. But most people feel a shift, and when we get those positive thoughts, that positive picture playing on autopilot in your head, my personal opinion, you will see a difference. That's that same power that got the patient's eye color to change, and high blood pressure and diabetes, things like that, to disappear and reappear. We're doing our best here to kind of tap into that and put it on our side. So I hope that helps people.
Mm. Yeah, I was actually going to ask you next, what's a typical session like? But I guess that's it's very similar to what
I just gave you a
you just
minimum
done.
right there.
You obviously read my mind.
So many people when they talk about NLP and stuff like that, they geek out. You know what I mean? They're talking about meta models and representational systems and all that stuff. People's eyes just glaze over. I just try to show people, all right, this is how it works, and people usually get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's much easier to just show you how it works, get you in touch with it, than people understand perfectly.
mm. Why do you think the subconscious element of pain is still so kind of overlooked in kind of conventional healthcare?
That is a great question. I I think the subconscious in general is overlooked. Like I said, I had several talk therapists when I knew I had anxiety issues and depression and all that. So I automatically went to a therapist. Now I'm not, uh, dismissing therapists in any way. It's a wonderful tool. But in my case, it just did not work. It was like a garden hose against the tide for me. For a lot of people, it's a wonderful thing. But my trauma was subconscious, and there's a lot of mystery around it. Not a lot of people understand it. Hypnosis is kind of almost like a taboo subject. You know what I mean? But once you really start to understand how it all works, how your subconscious is really the operator at the switch, then it's there's really no mystery to it. It's just our culture just hasn't placed a lot of emphasis where on where it belongs.
Mm, yeah. Uh, what do you think would change if pain was approached from more of a mind body perspective as standard?
That is another great question. My personal opinion, my doctor, if I go to him for pain, he's going to give me a pill. Now, again, wonderful tool. That it's great in a lot of situations. Please do what your doctor tells you. But a lot of us don't even consider that there are other options out there. You know what I mean? I personally try not to take a pill unless I really need to. And a lot of them make me feel loopy, which I personally don't like. But it's it's if you went to your doctor and he prescribed hypnosis, you would probably look at him funny. And again, that's a cultural thing. There are cultures where if you go to a witch doctor and they would do some kind of ritual
Do you
on
know?
you.
Do you know when I used to live in London? Um, I think I only ever saw him once in 40 odd years, but my rest of my family used to go, and he would often suggest things like hypnosis. He
Interesting.
was I mean, I would say he was bordering on probably losing his medical license because of the work that he
Wow.
did. But I was really impressed. Like a family member will come back and say, "Oh, this nut job doctor, he's telling me to do this or that, or I'm ill because of this." And I'm thinking, I think he's probably absolutely spot on. And I remember he did try hypnosis with one of my family members, and they just weren't open to it, and they just didn't kind of go along with it. But it's quite nice to know that there are some doctors out there that are actually looking. And this was a long time ago as well. And there
Yeah.
was actually a documentary on him. I think it might have been the BBC did a documentary on him. They were actually quite complimentary, which I was surprised about, and I was half expecting his medical license to be removed. But he was getting
The
really good
fine line
results.
there. Yeah.
He was getting really good results with patients. I remember
Yeah.
on the documentary there was a lady that came in, and I can't remember what her issue was. It might have been a headache. Like she just couldn't get rid of her headache. And he said something along the lines of, "Has your mother died recently?" And this woman said, "Yeah, how do you know that?" Because she wasn't one of his patients. And he said, "Oh, I just picked it up intuitively from you." And he said, I can't remember what he said, but he said, "What you need to do is go away and do something." I can't remember what it was, or like write a letter and, let her go or something like that. And
Mhm.
she was interviewed later on the documentary, and she said, "Yeah, my headaches completely went after that." You know,
Wow.
So yeah, he was quite well rounded for a medical doctor. He's probably retired now. Yeah, he's probably well into his 70s by now.
Oh,
So
wow.
there are
Hopefully
some
he
out there.
passed his knowledge along.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, it's that, that probably is a risk of,
yeah.
getting your medical license yanked when you step outside those, off those guardrails of what's considered accepted. You know what I
But
mean? But he got results that other people didn't.
I think
Otherwise, they wouldn't have
sadly,
made a documentary about him.
yeah, I think sadly now, certainly in the UK, and I'm pretty sure it's probably not that different elsewhere. A doctor sits at a computer screen. They type in the symptoms, and the computer tells the doctor what they have to do. Not
Yep.
not
Yep.
I mean, I had a family member went to see their doctor on Monday. They were taking no medications whatsoever, and the doctors put them on 8 different prescription medications in one go.
Wow.
And
I
it's like,
One of my 3 therapists was, offered no therapy. When I realized therapy was not for me, this was the 3rd one that I'd seen. The first one had a good reputation. She helped executives and people like that, high level people deal with stress. Mine was an extreme case. She was very good at what she did. I was the problem in that situation. And the second one wasn't much help. The third one, everything was a pill. There's no therapy going on. It's just, "Oh, you all right, there's a pill for that." I did not say this out loud, and I hesitate to here, but it's like, okay, you're not a therapist. You're a glorified drug dealer here,
mm,
basically. You know what I mean? It's like
yeah,
I had no expertise at all at the time, but I instinctively I knew that. It's like, all right, I'm dealing with mental stuff here. Yeah, the body keeps the score. That book he talks about. It's like it's kind of like changing the gas in your car's tank. It will run differently, but if you've got an issue with the engine, it's not going to fix that. Critical for some people, if you got extreme PTSD and you need, help chilling out, yeah, absolutely. But, when that's the only tool that you have, that's a problem, my opinion.
mm,
You need to really be able to open the hood and, work with the engine.
yeah. The old saying, if the only tool you've got is a hammer, everything's going to look like a nail,
Yes.
right? And if the only
Yeah,
tool you've got is a
absolutely.
prescription pad, what are you going to
Yeah.
offer people? You're going to offer them, you know, pharmaceuticals, which
Yeah.
is
And that
which is
was like
sad.
my first neuro who told me there was nothing he could do for me. That, a lot of people will get into professions like that. I only realized this years later. A doctor is considered, a high status profession here in the States, at least. Right. And they, oh, you should be a doctor or should be a lawyer or whatnot. And other people's definition of success led them to that career path. That's pretty common, in my personal opinion,
Mm,
at least here in the States. And when you do that, it's, unless you're curious and you really like to geek out on what it is you do, you're going to get to a certain point, you're going to pass medical school and all that stuff. And, it's an incredible accomplishment in itself. But contrast that with somebody who's genuinely curious about it, who's going to keep learning and, they go home and are geeking out about it. That's going to be a way better doctor. You know what
mm,
I mean? That's the
mm,
difference in my opinion. It's, you know what I mean?
yeah.
If it
I mean,
really
that's
feeds you to,
yeah. I mean, I've been studying for coming up 34 years, and I'm still like I'm taking a course at the moment, you know, and because
yeah.
I don't want to just have a hammer in my toolbox. I want the
Mhm.
whole set. Well, not the whole set because there's too much I think to learn in one
Yeah.
lifetime. But
Yeah,
I've got
I
I've
agree.
got
Yeah.
I've got quite a number of tools in my toolbox,
Yeah.
so that everything doesn't look like a nail, right?
Yeah.
So just to wrap up, if you were to leave uh, a message for anyone watching or listening to this that's in pain, chronic pain,
Mhm.
what would be your message for those people?
Like you mentioned, you don't have every single tool there is in your toolbox. None of us do, myself included, right? So when you've got, pain, a health issue, something like that, you really have to take the reins. You've got to take charge and say, okay, if this doctor doesn't have my answer, or this person doesn't have my answer, who does? You know what I mean? Do what your doctor tells you, but, don't be afraid to, look for stuff outside. I would probably still be sitting in that dark room if I'd only listened to my neuros. You know what I mean? I
Mm,
had to get outside that and explore, not just one, but two whole new worlds, the
mm.
energy healing and the hypnosis and NLP to really fix what was going on. 'Cause, I was really screwed up. it's, um,
I was,
it,
I
it's,
was, I
you
was
know,
actually, I was actually thinking if you hadn't have had that frame of mind, I think there's a good chance you wouldn't be in that dark room anymore. You'd be somewhere else, right?
Possibly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, quite possibly. But yeah,
So,
it's, again, it goes back to that decision. It's, when you have truly decided you cut off any other possibility, it's like, all right, I'm going to get there. I'll either find the way or I'll make it. And,
mm,
if you can find a role model, somebody who's done what, you want to do, that cuts out 90% of the work right there. So just do that, follow their path the way they lay it out. If not, if you have to be the trailblazer, then again, you just have to be open and figure out, okay, Google is your best friend. ChatGPT these days, it wasn't even a thing when I got my brain injury, but, just do what your doctor tells you, but, get his permission or her permission for, whatever you try. But, because you never know about, drug interactions or anything like that, be working with them, but be open
mm,
to what else is out there.
yeah.
And, that, yeah, my personal opinion, no matter what you're facing, you can make progress. The potential of any one of us is enormous. And if you don't believe that, look at somebody like Stephen Hawking. Couldn't even speak, and he
Mm,
changed our understanding of the universe, right?
mm,
No matter who you are, where you are. I met a lady with cerebral palsy who she actually ran the Kona Ironman. That's a marathon plus 100 miles biking plus couple miles swimming, something like that.
mm,
Incredible. I didn't even know that was possible, right? But, that just shows what you can do when you've made that decision. That, no matter where you are, you can make progress.
mm. One of the most inspirational people I've ever come across is an Australian guy called Nick Vujicic. Don't ask me to spell his surname.
Oh, I know he's the motivational speaker, yeah, doesn't have arms and legs.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, he is.
He
Yeah, incredible
he's an
story, incredible guy.
unbelievable
Yeah.
guy. Yeah, if you think you're having a bad time, go and check out Nick Vujicic on
Check him out. Yeah.
YouTube and see
Yeah.
how positive he is and how, the amazing things he's achieved in his life, and the guy doesn't have arms or legs,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Absolutely incredible.
So, yeah, you're absolutely right. So, Matt, what's next for you? What have you got in the pipeline?
That is a great question. I am actually launching a subscription next month. It's called Limitless by Design. We're taking every area of your life, health, wealth, relationships, and we're doing a deep dive, hypnotically into crafting the kind of person you want to become. So January is for New Year's resolutions and making them real. February is about relationships. March is subconscious spring cleaning, get rid of all the, clearing your crap basically. But every month we take a different theme and we're going to really up level your subconscious programming in that area of life. And, I'm keeping it super cheap, 27 American dollars per month. But, I got the inspiration actually from a book called No Limits by John Maxwell, where he talks about blow the cap off your capacity, where he talks about every area of your life and making it into what you want it. That's what we're really going for 1,000% with the membership. Beyond that, I do one-on-one sessions and also have a free NLP course on my website. It's called NLP Mind Magic, where we do the unspinning the stress like we did before. And we also have exercises for, procrastination, imposter syndrome, limiting beliefs. Basically, my top 10 most requested items. We do an NLP exercise for each. So, people get to check it out, no charge. But yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Awesome. And where can people find you online?
My website is mattjohnsonnlp.com. That's the MATTJOHNSON and the letters NLP for neurolinguisticprogramming.com, and that's got all of the above.
Awesome. Great stuff. Matt, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed our conversation today, and I really think it's going to spark some interest in the viewers and listeners today.
Thank you for having me. It's great being here. Great conversation. This is
Yeah,
fun stuff.
yeah, absolutely. It's good fun. So that's it from Matt and me for this week. But be sure to tune in, same time, same place, next week on Beyond the Pain. Thanks for listening to Beyond the Pain. If this episode resonated, please follow the show, leave a review, or share it with someone you know who's been struggling. And remember, pain is not permanent. With the right insight and support, you can turn it into power. Until next time, stay open, stay strong, and keep moving beyond the pain.